So, making the panel. So here's our panel, which has been printed out on A4 paper, 1:1 scale. I'm now going to transfer that to this piece of aluminium sheet. I think it's about 1.6 mil thick. So I'm going to start by transferring the outside size to that. Just use a hacksaw to cut it out, file it, take any burrs off, etc. And then we'll move on to the next bit. So here's the setup for how to do that, how to actually cut it out. There's my aluminium sheet. I've actually scribed in the marks, the outside, the perimeter marks of the panel. I'm just using a piece of wood and a clamp on the bench to hold it still while I chop through it. So here is the template actually being stuck to the aluminium sheet. Obviously taking note to have the front of the right front of the sheet to the front of the panel, so when there is actually a protective coating on the reverse of this, so we want that to be to the front. So now that's stuck on, I can start to centre pop every single centre of each of those holes and features. Then we'll move on to the next stage. Obviously, pardon the pun, sorry. So the panels had all the centre marks centre popped or centre marked. It's now on the table of the pedestal drill, and I've put quite a small drill in there just to start every single hole. The smallest hole actually in the panel is about 2.5 mil, so that's a 2 mil drill in there. So let's go ahead and start all these holes. Continuing on with the panel, here's some of the hardware. That's one of the input jacks, red for input, black for output. Some of the switches, etc, etc. I've got those out just to make sure that I get the right drill size, which is clearly important. Remember the old saying, measure twice, cut once. So I've put hopefully the appropriate drill size through all those. So the next stage is to remove that template and just take out all the burrs, get a file, clean it up, and then we'll do a trial fit of all the components to make sure everything's okay. So I've trial fitted some of the hardware. So there's a switch, some more switches, and an input jack. I've already tried the LEDs. These holes here for LEDs, 5mm LEDs, and they're okay. So let's get on with the next stage. So here's the next part of the panel build, probably the most difficult and arduous, which is to cut that slot for that slider. But we managed to do it. The way I did it was to actually centre mark a few holes in the middle, which using a drill, which the diameter is smaller than the slot width, and then basically join those holes up, smash out the bits of metal that were left in between, and then use this file, which is just a rectangular section with a tapered end to it, and just continue on following the whole pocket out. So there's a shot of the finished panel. Those slots were actually quite difficult to put in, but I think we got there in the end. I've trial fitted them so we can fit the fitting screws, them small screw holes in the top, which are these. And the slider actually goes full travel without hitting that edge, top or bottom, so that's what we're looking for. That's great. Moving on to the next bit then. So I've got some rotary potentiometers. These are a little bit too long in the shaft, so I'm going to have to trim a little bit off, so when we put the knobs on, they kind of seat somewhere quite close to the face like that instead of standing off. So that's what we're going to do next. 6 of those to do. Just a quick note on these potentiometers, you can see a little lug at the end of my finger stuck up there. Obviously when that butts up to the back of the panel, if there isn't a hole in the panel, which I haven't got, that's obviously going to create a mislocation problem. So I actually just take a pair of pliers and just snap that off, so we don't have to put a hole in the panel. It's just extra work for nothing. It's not really required in this, because once you put the nut on to tighten it to the panel, it doesn't move, it won't rotate under normal use, so everything's fine. One other thing, that's how I hold these. I just trim them off with a hacksaw blade. Just put it in a vise, put it in some aluminium with a hole in it appropriate size, put the nut on the back to tighten it up, and just chop through it, and then use a file to just smooth off the rough surface left by the hacksaw. Bit of sandpaper to tidy it up. Clearly we don't want to get any dust or muck inside there, so we need to work quite. So now we're going to turn our attention to the bracket which holds the PCB onto the back of the panel. So there you see the template that we've shown before. Basically just stuck it to some aluminium sheet. Same technique. I'm going to centre mark all those holes and all the vertices, which allow me to take the template off and scribe lines in to demark the edges of the bracket. So what I've done there is actually connected it to a larger piece. That's going to be useful later on, because I can actually hold it over here while I'm drilling and filing and what have you. Just makes fixturing and work holding a bit easier. So here we have the finished cut out bracket. All I've got to do now is put a 90-degree bend in, as I put the stages bend down. So I'll hold this and bend that down 90 degrees, put it in a vise to do that, and we're done. So I managed to finish the bracket. I've added a couple of jack sockets in there, a switch and one of the slider potentiometers. If I turn it over and look at the back, we can see that the bracket is fixed to the panel using those two jacks and that switch. So the bracket itself, it rises up between the two slots for the slider potentiometers and the other hardware. And if I turn it to the side, you can see two holes in the bracket, and they will be used to fasten the PCB to the full assembly, ready for wiring up. So now we turn our attention to the front acetate sheet, which was shown previously. This is actually a piece of acetate. So what I need to do now is cut all those holes out, cut the slots out for the sliders, and then cut the extremities out so it fits to the panel. Cut the overhangs off. So to do that, I'm going to use a Stanley knife, steel rule and some hole punches. Let's see how we get on. Additionally, I put a piece of hardwood underneath the acetate film, so it provides enough resistance from underneath for the hole punches. I find it gives a cleaner cut.